Morning. So keeping the Sabbath. Why is this so important? Well, I don't know about you, but if you think back just a minute to what was it like if you had that tradition growing up to keep the Sabbath? I know they're probably in this room alone, and we definitely know in the larger world, a great spectrum of how people, when they were growing up, and I'm asking that specifically when you're growing up, think back of how you interpret, people around you interpreted that for you, and what your memories are, and if they're good or bad, right? I had some friends who actually, I did not grow up Mennonite, but I had some good friends that as an adult that we would talk about it, and she talked about how she was not allowed to listen to music on Sunday, and they couldn't dance, and they were, her parents, they would come back after church, they of course obviously went to church, and then when they would come back, they had to, parents would go into the nap, and they were supposed to, if they didn't take a nap, they were supposed to just be quiet, that was Sunday, that was Sabbath. She has a very not good remembrance of the Sabbath. I have really sweet memories of the Sabbath. I grew up in a church where a lot of the family went, Methodist church, grew up with them. After that, we went to a grandmother's house that was all part of that community. Went to my grandmother's house, you always had lunch, we had cousins that we played with. I remember a lot of joy. I remember my dad and his brother. There wasn't a whatever basketball, baseball, football that they were watching on TV. Literally, like becoming children again, like taking wads of paper, and they had this makeshift hoop that they would throw, shoot hoops in the bedroom of their old bedroom, and table football, folding the into the triangle, all of that stuff. I have sweet memories. Sometimes bored. I was bored sometimes. I do remember that as I got older, right? But for me, it truly was a day of spending time with God and family. And I bring that with a very different light as I grew up, became an adult, and now I look at things. I don't believe with all my heart that when God asked us to have a Sabbath and to rest, that it was meant to be legalistic, that it was meant to be about rule following, but that it was actually a gift to us. What we needed to be able to go forward with our week. Most of us have heard by now the many, many analogies that everybody talks about how can we go out into the world, or how can we go and help others if we don't help ourselves first, right? And then a lot of times people give the illustration of the oxygen mask being, I flew this week, I was in Austin for a school conference, and they always tell you what, if you're traveling with small children or people who need assistance, what do you do first? You put the oxygen mask on yourself before trying to help others. Self-care, community care. That's what I think the Sabbath is all about. In Exodus, we've already heard some scriptures. It keeps coming up, but here's another. In Exodus 28 through 11, he says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For 6 days you will labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath. Yahweh, do not work on that day. Neither you or your daughter or son or your workers, men or women, animals, nor the foreigners who live with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that they had, but rested on the seventh. This is why Yahweh has blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred." Now we know from Jesus' examples, however, that he was definitely not legalistic in this, right? How often did Jesus get in trouble for supposedly working on the Sabbath, right? So again, I don't think this is about just trying to follow a rule. But what we see in Jesus is a model for healthy life rhythm. Jesus gives us the model for retreating for times with God, before he goes off to the crowds. Going to be by himself alone before going out to heal. Sabbath is about restoration. So the theme with all the seeds and all, I think the title for this week was something about like nurturing the soil for a fallow faith and that stuff. And it made me think of, obviously, land. Talking about seeds, right? And gardening. And the whole idea that we know that if you work land too much for too long, it no longer produces. Or if it does, not as much. The land needs fallow years just to rest, just to be. Our good friends up at Jubilee Partners did this with their land last year. If you don't know about Jubilee Partners, I would love to talk to you more, but it is an intentional Christian community that welcomes refugees. They have a humongous farm that really sustains them. I mean, they use what they are producing. They saw the importance, not only for the land, to lay fallow for a year. This year of Jubilee, it's even sometimes called. But also for the workers. They were tired. They had gone through COVID. They had less volunteers. They depend a lot on that. A lot of their partners are aging. It's a lot of work, and they wanted to be able to come back to it and do it well. And so they saw the need to take the year off. And now, this year, when they came to visit me, I got a huge container of blueberries and eggs and sweet potatoes. Their bounty is overflowing. Tanisha Sparks says, Sabbath is our opportunity to be one with ourselves, one with God, one with creation, in a way the other 6 days do not allow us to be as such. We honor this gift given to us by being present to receive the blessing of rest and renewal that God has in store for us. Sabbath keeping is about being with God. Being, not doing. I truly believe God is in everything. And I do mean everything. We're all created by God, in God's image. We're all unique. So I do believe that Sabbath keeping and how you spend time with God is just as unique and just as different, just as creative, and just as holy and sacred. I started looking because we've also, I love it when other folks bring voices to it, and Juneteenth was this month, and throughout this whole month, Sarah had given us some different spirituals and different things to look at with that. And so it made me start pondering, as I was preparing this, what did Martin Luther King and the other civil rights members, what did they say about Sabbath and Sabbath keeping? And I found this blog by Kristen Pinto Ferreira, and she talks about how Martin Luther King always observed the Sabbath. She says, on Sundays, he was always off the streets and in the pulpit. It was the day the community was called to confess sins, find inspiration, consolation, and rest, both in the churches and on their hot front porches afterwards. She says, when we come to worship on the Sabbath, we change the nature of the way we frame our lives. We go to church on this day reserved for this act, completed by the one who holds all of our lives and the life of the world within God's grace. We do this in order that our work may find worth and hope through its participation in the whole of God's work. Now, the thing is, our world has, even in my lifetime, changed very much from when I was a child, and how Sabbath and how Sundays are. As a child, there was nothing open on Sunday. I'm talking nothing in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Definitely couldn't buy alcohol. There were blue laws. But beyond that, there really wasn't. There wasn't things pulling us away in a lot of different directions. Everything closed down. That's not the case anymore. We know that. Not only is everything open, right? It's open all day. We have people, soccer play teams and tournaments. I mean, that would never have been heard of, but it's common now. It is not the same anymore. And so, yes, our Sabbath probably is going to look different. And that's okay. I do believe that's okay. But I do believe because of that, we have to be intentional about our Sabbath for whatever that means for us. Because it's not a chore, but a gift of enjoyment. It makes us look at things totally different. Now, think about it a minute. Again, I said, God has created all of us so differently. I truly believe God just wants us to rest and spend time with Him. And I thought about it with our children. I don't know if you were a parent, or if not, think back as you were a child. Many times as parents, we do things with our children that we have zero interest in doing. Like zero. But we do them because why? It brings enjoyment to our child. Sometimes as they get older, it's not as long as we would like. It might be just for a fleeting, 5-minute phone call, or the run by, that they come by to deliver something, or if you're lucky, a meal. We'll take whatever we can get, right? And I think that's a little bit how God views it. He wants you to spend time with Him in ways that you enjoy. He is everything because He's our Creator. He knows. Now, being in that intentionality things, that resting to recharge us for the work of the world. I thought a lot about, because as we all are attached to our electronic devices these days, the phone wears down, or whatever it is that you have, runs out of battery. I don't know how many of you have done this. Okay, so I go and I plug it in to charge it. But then what do? I keep using it. Well, it will give me a little bit of a charge, right? I plugged it into the energy source. But is it going to give me as much of a charge? Nope. Is it going to take longer to charge? Yep. As opposed to if I would just leave it alone. Plug it in, step away, and leave it. Now, sometimes I may not have time. Like I'm walking up, it's almost time for me to walk out the door and I realize I'm really low. So I will plug it in and leave it, even for a short time. But leaving it alone, even for a short time, is better than nothing. Right? And the best is obviously if I can plug it in, leave it, walk away, and let it get all the way to 100%. And it is ready for me to use for a whole lot longer. And then, I don't have an electric vehicle, but I work with someone who has an electric car now. And he was telling me about how sometimes you need a supercharge. So like he charges his electric vehicle and it may take several hours or whatever. But sometimes if he really needs it in a hurry, he can go to the main, like the dealership, whatever, the Tesla. He can go to the Tesla place and he does have to pay, but it'll do a supercharge in 30 minutes. And sometimes we need those supercharges. We have to do some Sabbath keeping that may cost us a little bit. Might cost us some of our time, but it also may even cost us a little money if we feel like maybe we need to go on a silent retreat, or we need to go away somewhere. Maybe I need to go to the mountains for a weekend, or whatever it is. And sometimes that's what I need. The amazing thing happens is though, when we have Sabbath for rest, we begin to trust God more. And in trusting God, we can truly rest in Him. This beautiful cycle. So I want you to start thinking, because in a few minutes after we sing something, we're gonna have a time for our own reflection. So I just want you to start thinking, what are ways you just enjoy spending time with God? What recharges your battery? The more creative, the better. Because we have a creative God. created.